With all the success you've had, do you still face, are you currently facing any fears, or are there fears about the horizon?
I have to give you amazing props. You're such a curious person about the people that you talk to. I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you.
The answer is, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've been on a ton of podcasts and people just same questions.
Welcome to the Idea Climbing Radio Show. Today we're here with Richard Saul Wurman. Richard created and chaired the TED Conference from 1984 through 2002, the TED Med Conference from 1995 to 2010, as well as the EG and WWW Conference. Richard has written, designed, and published 90 books on wildly divergent topics, including the recent Understanding Understanding. Thank you for being here, Richard. I appreciate you making the time.
Okay. One doesn't make time. Time is a given until it isn't.
Well, we'll go with thinking it for the time that's a given. And I'd love to talk about innovation and big ideas and how people can use innovation to bring big ideas to life. And I'd just like to ask you, as far as what innovation means so many things to so many different people, what does it mean to you?
Innovation for me, innovation period is not incremental change. And there is a confusion when you say innovation. For instance, there used to be a big sign going into San Francisco a few years ago that some car company or another with a big innovation, the innovation company or something. Mm-hmm. And their innovation on the poster on this big road sign was that they put a camera on the back of the car so you could see who you run over when you back up. I think it's nice to have a camera on the back of the car to see when you in reverse what you're seeing, but that's not innovation. That's just incremental change. That's something you change your shoes some morning, or you wear sneakers, or you get shoes that bounce a little bit, but it's not really innovation. Mm-hmm. Innovation is much more radical change, and it comes about for other reasons. Some certainly comes from need, but need is kind of a cause for innovation, or one of the ways of innovating. My iPhone is innovation by addition. There was lots of different things you could have. You could have a phone, and you could have a calendar, and you could have a message, and they keep on adding things, and there's new features and new features. Well, the features really aren't innovation. The innovation was the ability to add all these different things together and have them work with each other. That's the innovation. The TED conference itself was innovation by subtraction, at least a lot of it. I subtracted panels. I subtracted the lectern, so you couldn't put down a speech and read it, or stand behind it to protect your groin. You made yourself more vulnerable to the audience. I took away that if some company paid for a lunch, they didn't get to have a speaker. I took away that relationship. It was only about ideas. And it was ideas, and you couldn't talk to them. It was basically the conference I wanted to go to, but nobody had invented it, so I had to. I didn't have to, but it interested me. It made my 1 week really great, and it affected my life for 18 years. So innovation can be added and subtracted, need. Opposites is one of the great things about Niels Bohr, who got the, he's a year younger than Einstein, but they were very close friends, and yet they argued vigorously because one was quantum physics and the other was the regular physics, standard physics, quantum, all things to do with quantum mechanics, et cetera, et cetera. When he got his Nobel Prize in Stockholm, he said when he had a profound idea, he believes that the opposite of that idea is also profound. that the opposite of things is flip in. The black hole was discovered or postulated as being the most initially as the most vacuous place in the universe. And then about 15 years later, the same person said he made a mistake. It's the densest place in the universe.
Oops.
So opposites interest me. I look at something that has been brought to an apogee of some way, and then I try to think of what its opposite would be. And what would be if you sat down all the time instead of stood up? What would be the opposite of things, and try to find patterns in that. So one of the things I'm thinking about is a gathering where instead of people talk about their accomplishments, they talk about the other people that have surrounded them that they didn't copy, but influenced how they designed their life, not their own designs. That what did they take from other people? Whose shoulders did they stand on? And what shoulders did they rub, rather than what they did? And it's a way of maybe better knowing somebody, not their own work, but how did they, what were those things that gave them permission from the outside, not the ideas they had from the inside?
How do you think they form those relationships? I mean, they have people that lifted them up. That's a big part of big ideas. How do they form relationships where people will help you and give you something to brag about, if you will, about the other person?
Well, for instance, I stand on the shoulders of Socrates. I've never met him. So I don't even know if he had good shoulders, or he would take my weight. He didn't write anything, so I didn't read anything he wrote. I have a sense of who he was a little bit, and I have a sense of this big opposite he thought he postulated, that a good question was better than a brilliant answer. And so that affected my life, the asking of questions rather than trying to cleverly give answers. That my search is for the good question as a way of learning, the way of doing next. So it's not exactly what you're saying, but this is my journey.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with knowing the person or shaking hands with them or hearing a speech. It's a sense of somebody who affects what your next step is, how you put your shoes on in the morning, what you do.
Well, you've mentioned good questions. I mean, a few times in our past conversations. What makes a good question? Or a great one, if you will?
Well, that's like asking me what makes a great building. I can't answer. I mean, it's not a bad question. I just don't know how to answer that. It's the people who I admire, the people who I like to have in my circle, or my acquaintanceship, or who I observe, or who I listen to, or who I scan what they've said or read. I don't have to know them. Have this particular ability to ask a question. That is really that's a creative act. So I don't know how to tell you, just be creative, or just have a creative act. It's a little more complicated. It's like, how does a bee make honey? I don't know, but that's a good question. I don't know how it makes honey.
Well, how about
the simplest, the basic things, the clarification, making the complex clear is one of my taglines. And to me, everything is complicated. You've heard the little glib phrase, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And to me, everything looks like, whatever I have, what's behind that? What was before that? There's a chapter in one of my books called Before. We always think of before, but what's before that? And I don't know, but it's in not knowing that that I get a kind of sweet discomfort. It's uncomfortable. I'm interested in sandpaper on my fingers so I can open the safe. See, the odd thing is you sandpaper you've heard about robbers, they make their fingers more sensitive with a little sandpaper so they can feel the tumblers on the safe, they can feel that.
Mhm.
Well, that's sort of the opposite, why would you do something? What's interesting is when somebody wants to feel good, they get a massage, which is also often very painful. Isn't that strange? We pay somebody a lot of money to give us pain so we can have greater comfort. There's a lot of cycles I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about a glib answer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cycles in this flip of things. Now, if you go through an ordinary day, of course, no day is ordinary. I take that back. Every day I'm alive is very special. From a day, let's say that people want to have a happy day or do this. If I went out, if I fell down and broke my arm on the way out of talking to you, I would hate that. I would hate that. But it would be very interesting. I've never broken a bone. I don't want to ever break a bone. But if it happened, man, would I try to squeeze out everything I could from that experience. It would be interesting. What kind of a break is it? What is the break of a bone that's 88 years old as opposed to a bone of somebody who's 18 years old? How long should it heal? Do they use electricity to heal it? I heard that they do that sometime. How do they measure how severe it is? Do they need to use screws to set it, or can it be put into place and bound up? And how long does it take? And how do they know how long it takes, or postulate that? What really goes on when it gets fused? Can they show me? How does it heal itself? How does something in there know to heal itself? How does it grow together? What happens to the veins that went across it? Did they get broken too? Do they knit them together? What do they do with all the little things that are in there? I have no idea. I'm just telling you the thoughts that would come to my head if I broke my arm. And that would make the day interesting, but not happy.
Well,
So
I know you just,
it's
what was that?
interest is my goal, not happiness.
Well, you just showcased your extreme curiosity, and you brought that up a lot. Can you speak a little bit to the importance of curiosity in life?
I can only speak to how it wouldn't be a life without it. What would I do every day? What is life without wanting to pick up the corner of something and see what's under it? I can't imagine a day like that. I can't. No, you can maybe imagine it, or somebody else can. I can't answer that question. I don't understand the raison d'etre. The reason for being is what is next, or under, or behind, or the question. The reason for being is not the answer for me.
What is the answer?
That's right. You've just put your finger on all of science and all of religion in one fell swoop. And on the question could be, what is life?
Yeah,
The clearer the question, the more mystical it gets. We shouldn't get there. Nobody in the audience is going to be interested in this blah, 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 because it gets to be, for many people, this is a woo-woo conversation. People want something they can go home and hammer that nail with, I think. But you asked me a question, I'm answering. I don't think I'm a woo-woo person, but these are my thoughts.
exactly.
I think I'm a nuts and bolts guy. I mean, I don't think I'm a fancy guy with esoteric thoughts. I think my thoughts are, the only charm I have about my thoughts is that they're so basic and so dumb.
So when you talking about your thoughts, and you had mentioned a couple of things, you mentioned innovation by addition innovation by subtraction. What other kinds of innovation are there? Because I know there's a couple
Innovation
more.
comes from no's, from opposites.
Okay.
Yeah. Some innovation you can't put your finger on. Somebody's working and they're fooling around with various glues for a big corporation, and the glues they're testing out don't work. They stick, but they come apart. And that's an epiphany. He looks at it, he says, holy moly. And that's how the Post-it note was invented by 3M, because they had something that didn't work, and somebody had an epiphany that by it not working, it could be used again and again and again. And it was the Post-it note was a glue that didn't dry. It just was sticky. That's innovation by epiphany, where you see something, you can't plan for it, you can't predict that direction, you can't go to school for it, you can't be taught it. But you see in some other, it was like the accidental discovery by Fleming of penicillin. It was just a fungus. It was like, the stuff on cheese. And it turned out that he saw a pattern that had killed things. And he then worked with it, and it was penicillin, the first of the antibiotics.
And that falls into the epiphany mode, or was that the opposites?
Yeah, no, that's epiphany. Well, he can do both. I'm not trying to convert anybody. You know, I don't need it on my gravestone that he said that there was 5 ways of innovation, but it can be in one of my books.
And there's a lot of them.
For instance, I say there's only 5 ways of organizing information by location, alphabet, time, category, and hierarchy. Nobody has ever come up with a 6th. I've come up with a potential 6th, and then I threw it away. And other people have said, well, maybe you should keep it in. And I've thought about it and asked people, and people smarter, easy to find people smarter than myself. So I think there's 5. And then since I came up with this probably 15 years ago, and I talk about it lots in public, and other people have organized, Tashin has organized his major volumes, big fat volumes on information, basically based on my information architecture idea, information graphics. Organized them by the theory of Latch, that there's only 5 ways of organizing all these examples he has, and he gives me credit. I say, well, maybe it works until somebody, maybe in 10 years, 1 year, 1 month, 5 years, comes up with a 6th or a 7th or a different theory. I didn't do it scientifically. I just couldn't think of a 6th. So I think there's 5 ways. That helps me. That's the way my mind works, is how to organize things so I can begin something. I do a lot of projects, and there's an almost infinite amount of stuff out there always. How do you start? How do you begin? By organizing it so you can get your arms around it. So these are devices don't exist or that I can't find, so I invent them. My goal is just to try to understand things and clarify things, because I'm not so smart. I'm certain you're much smarter than I am. I always, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. I just trying to find devices, because I didn't have the chance to learn them at school, because the people who think they're teachers, they teach what they were taught when they went to the schools of education. So I don't want to be educated. I would like to, I think there should be a board of learning, not a board of education. And it should come from helping you get in touch with your interest and see like a great, I just saw a map. It was less than a week ago. Came on Facebook. Somebody popped it up for some reason. It was a map of the United States, which only showed the Mississippi River and all its tributaries. And it basically covers the whole country. The teeniest little streams they had, they just had it all going down this lacy, organized tree down to the Mississippi, coming out into the Gulf of Mexico. Oh boy, I didn't think it would be that big. All of a sudden, I understood it better. What a complex thing it was, that you could possibly put a bottle in 2,000 miles away, or 1,500 or 1,800 miles away, and it would come out the Mississippi out to the out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, you covered them pretty fast. What, as far as getting organized, getting started, what are the 5 ways again?
Oh, it's in all of my books. Everybody should know it. Location, alphabet. It's latch. Think of a window latch. Think of Windows. That's Microsoft has Windows. There's a latch to the window. Latch is spelled L-A-T-C-H.
Mhm.
Location, alphabet, time, category, hierarchy. That's it. I can't remember things unless I do that. Those kinds of things.
So once you get organized, then what do you do from there? You use Latch, you get organized.
Well, let's say, okay, I did a series of, I think I ended up with 22 guidebooks called the Access Guides to cities around the world. And then I did an access guide to the Olympic Games, an access guide to a diagnostic test for men, diagnostic test for women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, you have to begin it. So you have to think, well, how are you going to organize all the information on a city so you can find your way around, correct? I mean, this is not from the head of Zeus, you would think that's what you have. Well, when you go to a city, is your plan to see a city by seeing all the museums one day, all the restaurants another day, all the great buildings another day, all the parks another day? Is that the way you see it? No, you don't see it that way. You go to a city and you have something that you know about. Something you have to start. If you're at a hotel, you start at a hotel. You start someplace. If you drive into a city, where do you start? Where do you find what's there? And then let's say you check into a hotel. That's a logical thing. It's not the only way, but it's a logical thing. You check into a hotel, and often you end up at the concierge desk and saying, where can I eat nearby? Well, that's the whole hint of the book. Where are you and what's around you? So anytime you find a place, instead of having a whole chapter on restaurants, if there's a restaurant right nearby the hotel or right next to the hotel or across the street, there's a museum, there's a paragraph on each of these entries, and you organize them on a page next to each other. So there's a hotel and there's a restaurant and a museum and a restaurant and a great building to see and something else. Well, then they would all run together. So you just change the color of type. So red are all the restaurants and blue are hotels and black or something else. But they're next to each other like a word map. So they're organized by location, not by a chapter, which is by category.
Mm-hmm.
And then the hierarchy is you rate a restaurant by how much it costs and how good it is. So you have $1 to $5 and 1 to 5 stars. That's hierarchy, from less to more, right? It's more expensive, but a lousy restaurant, whatever you put it together, right? That's for you to do. I'm just giving you one example of the, not infinite, but the huge numbers of examples of questions you could ask of one of my access guides. But you're empowered. Maybe you come into town and you go right to a museum. Well, you can see if there's another museum nearby, or again, someplace to eat, or where can I stay for the night where I could be near these museums? That's the way you use something. So by location, that's location. Alphabetically, because that's the way you want to find things. That's a good way in, because it's 26. It already, in our head, we know the alphabet, so we can organize things in 26 ways. And that cuts across and multiplies your organizational abilities. Time, you could see when something is open or closed, or what different times of the day, what you can do, or time has an effect on some things, but not everything. You don't have to use all 5 all the time, but it's the way you start, you know, what's open in the morning, what's open in the afternoon. You could organize a way of seeing a city then what can I do at night, right? I mean, a way of using a city might be, I'm only going to be there in the evenings because I have meetings all day. What can I do in a foreign city every night? What restaurants are open late? What museums are late? What things are open? What can I do?
Could you use the same system for when you say where you are and what's around you? In this case, it's a literal physical location. Could you do the same thing as far as big ideas and what's around you in the sense of resources? I mean, would that be correct, or would that be on point?
You could, yeah.
Okay.
And you can use, there's only 5 ways. of innovation, just happens to be 5 ways. There's only 5 subjects that basically all of information is divided into. And so that just helps you begin. You have to begin. I'm not saying that's the way I spend every day of organizing things, but I'm just talking about how to begin. Beginnings are often really hard. They're the most exciting time of a project, but they're quite difficult. And they're the time of this sweet terror. And I wouldn't do away with being terrified. I mean, if I wasn't terrified, I would have no life. It's that terror of not knowing that is the impetus that makes me try to look things up, try to see connection, try to see patterns, try to see, one of the ways of organizing things is by tree structures. But there's about 100 different kinds of tree structures of ways of organizing things. Out the branches, or branches that all come from the trunks, or 2 branches that come different ways. A lot of fine branches, leaves on leaves, fruit on the leaf, or by the stem of the leaf. There's a lot of models you can have in your head for how you think of ideas, sets and subsets. That's not very complicated. You can just go out in your garden, look at a tree, and find it interesting. I'm not trying to make things complicated or odd or difficult. I'm trying to not simplify. Simplifying is taking words away, taking information away, and obviously it looks cleaner and easier. But that's a dumb way of doing things. That dumbs you down. I try to make everything as dense as I can, but still find my way around. For many times, the way of traveling around the United States, and the most popular book in the United States was the Road Atlas, that big Rand McNally Road Atlas, that paperback that people had. And about 15, 20 years ago, before the computer was what we have now, 25 years ago, I realized that I had just bought a car. I hadn't had a car because I was living in the city and I didn't need a car, but I bought one. And a house out of the city as a second house. So I wanted to get a road atlas. That's simple. And the only one that seemed to be out there was the Rand McNally Road Atlas. And as I turned the page, it started with, I think, Alabama, and it had all the states in it alphabetically. And I realized I don't drive alphabetically. You don't drive. You don't go from Alabama to Arizona, or you don't go to the A states and then the B states and then the C states. You drive from one state to another. It wasn't the way of organizing. That's not the way you would organize a map of the United States, by the alphabet. And yet that was the best-selling paperback in the United States. And it was the book of choice, it was the only choice, of how you'd have a road atlas. And yet it was completely wrong. It was fundamentally wrong. So I did my own road atlas.
Well, you made your own way. It sounds like, I mean, that's how you live too. Once people begin, because that's the hardest part, it's terrifying, it's scary.
I was trying to tell you a beginning. There's the beginning. The beginning was that the only thing available, and the best of what was available, was something that was completely wrong. So that gave me something to do. Because I couldn't get it. My TED conference was, I was interested in all these subjects. I didn't want to go to a conference on architecture, or one on medicine, or one on science, new science things, and one on business, and one on this, and one on that. I wanted to see the potential of these connections, that everything connects to something else. You heard me just explain an idea having breaking my arm. That connects to everything, to my whole body, to why did I break it? What's the rate of accidents by age? I could talk for a whole day nonstop about what you could learn from breaking your arm. So I wanted to have a conference that was horizontal, because I realized that the world needs specialists that are vertical, that keep on doing one thing better and better and better. I'm not saying this is instead of, but there is an option. If that doesn't appeal to you, there's an option to go sideways. You can see all the sideway connections to things. There's less people like that, and that's okay. There shouldn't be necessarily more. I'm not trying to proselytize that people change their way of life. But for me, I'm interested in everything there and there, right? Because I'm not so smart, I'm not going to get so good in anything. I'm not going to be the best graphic designer, the best architect, the best thing of anything. I'm going to see other things that are interesting horizontally.
So what do you do after you begin? What's the next step? Okay, you begin on a journey, then what?
Just have a question about it, just what I talked to you when I said about breaking my arm. That's why I did a whole series of medical books. That's why I did a medical conference, because I didn't know about that whole subject. So it's by not knowing about it that I become an expert in how to organize it, because I'm so dumb.
Well, you're so curious. There's a difference, I think.
Well, I mean dumb in a good sense. It's not a self-deprecation.
Okay.
I mean dumb, simple, some dumb, just down there. It's like the poetic dumb when a child asks why. You know, why does that caterpillar bump his back up in the middle when it goes? Why? And then he gets shoved away often in a household. Say, if you ask me one more question, you're going to stay in your room. I just don't stop asking why. But that why is the brilliance of that child's life. That's you shouldn't put your thumb on that. It's frustrating because we don't have the answers to a lot of things. But even explaining to the child your lack of answers and why you don't know is better than saying, don't ask so many questions. So that's what I do. Every day is a day of looking at something and turning it over. I've already done it all morning. I do it before I go to bed at night. Something piques my interest in the newspaper, and I take out my iPhone or I look at a book and I try to find out. I stop when I don't understand what somebody's saying, or saying a word, or somebody talking to me. I just stop. I stop. I'm annoying.
Because of asking why?
Why? Stopping a conversation, saying, I don't understand what you're saying. But that being annoying is the pleasantest part of my life.
Well, isn't that just come back to the root of curiosity? Some people might find it annoying, but I know some people do that. They use an acronym in a conversation. They act like they know what it is and they get lost.
Yes, it is. I was just trying to polish it and give you different ways.
Thank you.
Because the one we could just have this whole 45 minutes or hour or 10 minutes, whatever this interchange is, you could just say, we're very happy today to have Richard Saul Wurman. He's curious and he does lots of projects on different subjects to try to make them understandable to himself. And sometimes other people find them interesting. Thank you very much, Richard. And that's the end of our talk. Because basically that's all I'm saying. I mean, I can go into details about it. I mean, I'm fascinated by cartography. I do more and more cartography all the time, but I was fascinated with medicine. I was fascinated with running conferences. I'm doing another gathering probably that's going to be called E, big fat E, like the big fat E in TED, which was for entertainment. Only this is going to mean explaining, and it's going to have a 2 after it, like it's square. So it's going to be called Explaining, and it's going to be have people actually who are brilliant in some subject explain it so we can understand it. Not their big new theory that you don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but just explain something.
And make it understandable, right?
Just, you know, for instance, I'm going to make something understandable to you that you might not understand. For instance, throughout, probably from when you were 10 years old, you probably had someplace, you heard the word acre, and you heard maybe your uncle had a 2-acre farm, or you know somebody had a 1/4-acre house, or you've heard the term there was 1,000 acres destroyed by a fire, or you've seen the word. It's a common word. It's not a strange word. It's a word you learn fairly young. And then so I ask you, well, what is? You agree with that that's a common word?
Yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
So explain to me the size, so I can understand it, obviously. How big is an acre?
If I remember correctly, I believe
Oh,
it's a
well,
football
so-
field.
Yeah, well, but you didn't know that because you read
Yeah.
in one of the books, right?
Oh, you told on the last conversation you mentioned that.
Well, yeah, but that's a good example because I think many of the people listening can't explain what an acre is. And some that remember from school, maybe they can tell you it's 43,560 square feet. And that's the actual size of an acre. The actual size of an acre is not slightly smaller than a football field without the end zones. That's an approximation. That's not accurate. That's not exact. I would not buy acreage based on a football field, that definition. But it's close to it, and I would use it to understand it. So in parlance, in popular conversation, somebody said they just got a couple acre house, had 2 acres. I could see in my head a couple acres, a couple football fields.
Mhm.
But
How do
there's
you
no-
make something understandable though?
Well,
Because you said simplifying, you take too much away.
well, I didn't take too much away. I think I did that. That's a pretty good. It's not exactly right, but it communicates. So you can use it. You could use it in a sentence. Use it to talk to somebody, make it understandable and that stuff. You could read an ad saying that a house has 3 acres. You would understand that. But when you bought it and you wanted the deed, you'd want those acres. Then how many square feet is that
Oh.
lot? Because you're buying it legally, and there you need that kind of accuracy. There's one kind of accuracy that somebody's 6 foot tall or 6 foot and an 1/8 inch tall. Would you say that? Nobody says that. If they're slightly over 6 foot, they say 6 foot. So is that lying? No, it's just communicating.
And making it understandable.
They're communicating with another human being that understands the same thing, right?
So it sounds like to keep going on a discovery of a big idea, getting started is the big part. And then is it constant curiosity the rest of the way along the road?
Well, starting as I just have some ideas about things. I was the idea of standing on somebody's shoulders or rubbing shoulders came to me because I realized I never get to see my back. I never get to see my shoulders. And yet it's about 1/3 of my body, it seems to me, my back. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but it's about 1/3 of my body, maybe half. And I don't get to see it, which is strange. A whole part of my body I don't see. And you always see your face backwards in the mirror. And it really looks different if you see it the way it is. People are surprised when they look at their face and there's a double mirror gadget that makes you see the way other people see you. Or you could take a photograph and flip it, negative.
Yeah.
And you look different. You just look different. So then I thought, well, then that went to, well, how do we use our shoulders? And then I thought, oh, well, you stand on people. That's a whole different thing. It's not really knowing your shoulders, but the image in our head of spreading our shoulders, spreading our wings is an expression we use. So we think of our shoulders being encompassing, that people stand on them. We rub shoulders. We avoid rubbing shoulders. And I thought, what an interesting thing that's in our language and our imaging about our lives and the influences in our lives, or our influences on other things by embracing, spreading our wings, which are our shoulders, and how that plays, and yet we don't see it. And so I thought, well, that's interesting because the street is a different way. When you stand on somebody's shoulders, you're getting something from other people. By definition, you're not giving. That's the way my head works. So then I try to think of, well, what would happen if you had a whole bunch of people and you limited them to not talking about themselves, but what others have spelled off of them, ethically, unethically, morally, unmorally, their sense of excellence, their sense of whatever, pride, of permission. What are those things that come into you from parents, from elders, from children, from people in the past, like Socrates, that come into your system that aren't yours, but you absorb into your life. So you asked me how I began. Well, that's how I began that, but that's not how I began doing my book on the Olympics that I sold 3 million copies of. That was a very dumb thing. That was just, I love the Olympics. I loved watching them on television. And I was in LA and the Olympics were going to be in LA, but I can't stand crowds. I don't go to any events. I can't stand crowded places. I don't go to football games anymore. I used to, but no, I haven't for 60 years. I don't like to go to movie theaters or crowded restaurants or certainly any music events or theater, right? Nothing like that. And I certainly wouldn't go to the Olympics, even though they were going to be in LA. And then I like to watch them on television, but the people on television never tell you anything about the sport. I don't know how they score. They just give you a few minutes, but I don't know how they score many of the sports. Archery, I don't know how they score it and what the rules were. What the rules, the weight changes in wrestling that's different than weight changes of the different things in boxing. Everything was different, and they never tell you anything about it. They're more interested in doing an up close and personal with at one time with the people who were changed their nationality to go learn the sport someplace else, and all the personal stuff, because they think that's what people are interested in. And maybe some people are, but I was interested in understanding the sport, and I couldn't find anything that did that. So I did my own book. I did all the Olympic sports, explained every single one. I just arranged them 2 ways, alphabetically, and what took place inside, outside, and on the water.
You made it understandable.
I made it understandable. And I sold millions and millions. I sold 3.5 million copies, 3.4 million copies. I exaggerated.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground.
That came from some other place. And
Okay.
that beginning was different. And the reasons for doing it were just to fill in this hole, because I wanted to understand the Olympics, because I love the Olympics and I couldn't find it. But it's not a very esoteric thing. It's not a very brilliant thing. You're not going to get a Nobel Prize in understanding the Olympics, or get to be a professor anywhere because you understand the Olympics, or get the 3 corners of what all your listeners in general are interested in is fame, power, and money. And that doesn't come from understanding the Olympics. So what drives you to do something? Well, what drives me to do something is that I embrace my ignorance. And I can't live with it when I'm interested in something. It's not noble. It's not trying to help the public. I don't care if you buy my book and understand the Olympics. I don't want more people to understand the Olympics. That's not my goal in life. My goal is for myself. And if I make it so somebody of my level of aptitude and IQ can understand it, then other people might find it understandable and interesting. Some. If it's enough, fine. If it isn't enough, then it's not enough. I'm not going to reprint the book anyway. So.
Well, I think that's a good spot to close. I'm just wondering, we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, considering everything we spoke about. As far as innovation goes, what's the most important thing about it to share? If they said this one thing is the most important part of innovation, what would you say?
I would, well, in the last 2 or 3 years, when I look at a subject and I'm sort of blank about a subject, I do look at the standard description and I try to look at the opposite of what everybody's doing.
Okay.
And I found that to be really exciting and useful. Really a radical opposite, not just I'm not trying to do a better conference or a better mousetrap. I'm trying to do something that would be the opposite of what people are doing.
Thank you for your time, Richard. I appreciate it.